Well, hello everyone. This is John Byrne with Poets and Quants. Welcome to P&Q Perspectives. It's a new series that we're featuring at Poets and Quants, and this session is on AI and business education. And to address that topic, we have three AI experts who I think you're going to enjoy very much. Let me introduce each and every one of them. Eric Bradlow, who is a professor of marketing and vice dean of AI and analytics at the Wharton School. He's also chairperson of Wharton's marketing department. We have Sharon Chen, who's the chair and professor at the Department of Information Systems at the W.P. Carey School of Business at Arizona State University. And then we have Balagi, the Dean's Professor of Decision, Operations, and Information Technologies at the University of Maryland's Robert H. Smith School of Business. Welcome, everybody. Eric, let's start with you. I mean, what's your sense of the current role of AI in shaping the landscape of business education and its ultimate impact on future career prospects?
Yeah, it's great to be here, John, on Poets and Quants. I think the answer is I have three perspectives. One is from the student's perspective. I don't know how a student can't be trained in the use of AI and large language models today. It's not just efficiency, it's summarization, analysis. It's a whole set of skills that employers are going to want them to have. So if I'm a student, I would only go, whether it's the Carey School, the Robert H. Smith School, the Wharton School. If a school's not embracing AI, I don't know, that seems pretty tough. The second is from an educator's perspective. So I'm using AI in all my classes now. Help me construct exams, help me to summarize information. I'm a statistician by training, help me to do analysis, etc. And then finally, from a recruiter's perspective, we all know the lore of them giving case studies to people I would give someone a problem and say, how would you use artificial intelligence to research and solve this problem? So I think students, we as educators and recruiters all have to embrace it. And that's the philosophy we're taking at Wharton.
Sharon, what's your perspective on that?
I completely agree with Eric's points. So here at WP Carey, we also embrace AI. So not only that we are offering a range of courses related to AI, but we also embrace AI in our teaching and learning. So we actually enlist AI as a personal assistant, teaching assistant, and collaborator. So I think it's very important to know that AI has actually taken away a lot of the technical barrier. So what that means is that everyone's technical skills got leveled up. So we can actually do a lot more, taking it as a building block. So we can do and achieve more by collaborating with AI. So that's why I think it's important, like every business education actually embrace AI.
And Bagaji, I'm assuming that it's the same story at Maryland. And maybe I want to put a little twist on this then. In the early days, when ChatGPT first came out, and after all, it wasn't really our first use of AI. We've been using it in the background for quite some time, but we weren't totally cognizant of it. But when it first came out, ChatGPT, a lot of academics were quite wary of it. And they were saying, oh, we might have to go back to pen and pencil tests. And we might have to ban the use of it. And really, all it is truly an incredible productivity tool, and it can't really be ignored, right?
Right, and thank you for having me here with this amazing group. And I have a strong bias from a tech background. My undergrad was in computer science, and then I came into a PhD in business and so on. And I've been doing this for 25 years. I've taught machine learning courses for MBAs in '98, and I forced people to do things that they didn't like, but they enjoyed it. And I've always felt that MBA students need to have a strong understanding of capabilities of technology. Because, for instance, when the thing that worries me a lot when I hear some references to AI in the business context is talking about AI as if it's magic, right? And so I tell most of my students, if you want magic, go watch Harry Potter. If AI is, but interestingly, under the hood, magic is actually a good metaphor for AI, because when AI works well, it can be almost magical, but even magic under the hood is very deterministic, right? A magician follows a set of procedures, and we know exactly what's happening. And great AI, I think, works that way. So at the Smith School of Business last year, when I came in, I'd worked with a lot of our faculty, and we have an AI specialization in the full-time MBA program that spans courses but touches upon themes. And the key takeaway is, we want our business students, undergrads, MBAs, others, to understand capabilities, so that when they think of business applications, they're not thinking in terms of, just magical capabilities, but with a good understanding of what it can and cannot do, and to approach their careers that way.
John, if you don't mind, I'd also like to build on Balaji's point in your question about, when you talk about paper and pencil. I think, as someone that spent 2.5 years prior to becoming a full-time academic at the Educational Testing Service in Princeton in their statistics and data science research group, I have a lot of thoughts about this. What are you testing people on? Like, are you testing me on an artificial world where I don't have access to computers, I don't have access to technology? Like, what test is that? Like, what sense of reality is that? So to me, I think people confound, like, you mean I'm going to have to change the way I ask tests? Yeah, I'm going to have to change. But to me, I don't know why would testing someone on an artificial environment that no business would ever face, that's not an interesting form. As Balaji knows, I'm a statistician. That's not an interesting form of extrapolation. I have no interest in how you would perform in a world of 1930. Not interested.
Yeah, that's a really good.
I think Eric is a bit of an outlier here, I would assume, because I talk to a lot of academics, and I completely agree with that perspective. Because I think for a very long time in academia, we've tested people in a very artificial way. Simple things like group work, right? I mean, you cannot collaborate with your teammates. You have to do this alone, and so on. In the real world, almost nothing happens individually, right? People work on teams from day one. They share information. But in academia, we've been a lot more old school. But I think that tension is exploded now with Gen AI. Like being able to do the identical questions that we're asking them to do, and then saying, no, you cannot consult this, go do your homework on your own. I mean, this is starting to sound like silly season, and it's only a question of time before it all sorts of breaks down. And I think where it will force us to do is to rethink assessment, rethink evaluation, and be very clear what it is we want people to understand. Now, if we really want people to understand how to derive confidence intervals, then yes, we have to teach them. But every profession, every discipline within business has to make that call. What is it that we want our students to really understand? And then figure out how to test it. So I think we're at an inflection point where we have to ask ourselves these tough questions. And the hard courses like business statistics and machine learning and so on, these are the areas where it's coming up very quickly, because none of the old exams or tests make as much sense today.
True, and I remember those days when the early days of teamwork and collaboration were not as common as they are today. I mean, today it's an essential part of every business education, but I remember going to a conference where the dean of MIT Sloan, Lester Thoreau, the famous economist, turned to Don Jacobs, the dean at Northwestern Kellogg, after he described their team-based approach, and he said, at our school, we call that cheating. So, we've come a long way from that. Sharon, give me some specific examples of how Carey is integrating AI into its curriculum.
Yeah, so I should mention that ASU is actually the first university to partner with OpenAI. So we are actually offering our faculty as well as students access to enterprise licenses. I think this is very important because, again, we wanted to make sure that students have these experiences actually working with AI to boost their personal productivity. Because these kind of experiences will help them, develop the skills in the future to actually infuse AI into, organizational processes or business models. And so in addition to this, we also offer a range of courses, for example, like AI in business. So it offered AI landscape, right? Introducing the history, the fundamentals, and then the impacts of recent advancements such as large language models, right? And then what you can do with it. We also have courses on AI business strategy, data and technology governance, and most importantly, we also emphasize ethics and responsibility in how we teach students, because we believe that it's very important to develop thoughtful leaders and mindful leaders who can actually, drive and shape the future world, responsibly. So these are the different ways that we actually integrate AI into our curriculum.
And I'm imagining that that's similar to all the schools, but I wonder to what extent AI is being embedded across the core curriculum, where a professor in strategy, a professor in leadership, and accounting, finance, stats will have AI exercises of one kind or another. Eric?
Yeah, so I think most universities, as I'm sure Balaji and Sharon, well, former students of ours would agree with, universities succeed when they're both top-down and bottom-up. And so what do I mean by that? The top-down approach is, so we're launching and have launched an AI major. We've had a business analytics major for 10 years now. Students are going to flock to it. We know all of that. We too have courses, as Sharon mentioned. One of the unique advantages of Wharton is we have a legal studies and business ethics department. We have a whole set of scholars that are working on responsible and ethical AI and issues associated with that. But the school can only do so much. That's the top-down approach. We can create a major, we can do that, we can incentivize fact. Then there's the bottom-up approach. So then there's every professor, she, he, they is going to have to decide for themselves how much to AI-ify their course. So what are we doing at Wharton to incentivize that? So we've created what we call an AI education fund, where there's literally financial and staff resources. If Professor Chen wants to AI-ify her course and she's hesitant, well, we can provide you a bunch of RAs, we can provide you technical support staff, we can provide you marketing staff, video staff, all kinds of staff to help nudge you along if you'd like. So my view is, I like the word that Balaji said earlier when he was describing, if you're not going to allow AI on your exams, or that's going to pass very, very quickly. So to me, schools that approach top down and bottom up will be the ones that encourage innovation, but also the dean's office, the school, puts a stake in the ground.
Which leads to the next question. I wonder how resistant some professors might be in incorporating AI into their teaching and their classroom. Balaji, what have you found?
I think it's most schools, if you take the SMART strategy, it's having a top-down approach, but then letting the bottom-up process. Like, I think if you trust your people, you let them do what they feel is right, right? And there will be faculty who are very strongly against it for whatever reason, but there's a reason, like, we hired them, right? I mean, we really trust their perspective, and I think we would never want to interfere with their judgment calls. And so if there is someone who wants to teach a course a certain way, they have a perspective, right? And I think the great thing about academics is that across, like, you'll not find two people with the exact same perspective, but students benefit when they see. So if you go to the class, I think the takeaway that students will have will be very different, and then they will start putting it together across courses, right? And so I think on the bottom up side, I think we are seeing a lot more though. I think I'm very surprised at how many faculty, even people who've been around a very long time, are actually running to. They're excited. Like, it's almost like they found rebirth in their own disciplines again. And business school academics are tremendously innovative. I think if you give them something, like Gen AI here, the kinds of questions they ask, the kinds of things that they play around with, it's just incredible to see the ideas that people are coming up with. So I think the folks who choose not to use it are likely to be a minority sound, but that's okay. I think we do want them to do what they feel is right in the classroom. But on the top down, I think we have this specialization. We've structured it a certain way, emphasizing capabilities, applications, and so on, and cutting across important themes. For instance, I think like colleagues mentioned, ethics and responsible use and so on. Now, those are important, but I think the number one issue to focus on is business value and return on investment, right? And I think you have to have that front and center, because a lot of the firms I think we talk to and we work with, I haven't had this conversation with my colleagues here, but I'm assuming that they've had similar conversations, is that there are some firms who are extracting value very easily. But majority of the larger firms are trying, and it's going to be a process before they can actually demonstrate measurable ROI on AI use, because AI is very expensive in so many different ways. And so to have the business school students to think about, the capabilities, also to think about it from an ROI governance point of view, there are risks, there are harms, there's dangers, but there's also the amazing things you can do. And we want them to learn about how do you, if you go out in the workforce, how do you manage this? How do you govern this so that you get the best while mitigating the harm, right? And I think that's the perspective. You cannot do it all in a single course, but across courses, like this is the theme that they'll walk away with.
Also, John, just one other thing, building on what Balaji said just quickly, is that, remember, we have customers. We have customers, the students. And so let's imagine Professor Bradlow does not AIify his course and Professor Padmanabhan does. Well, I'm going to tell you where the students are going to flock. And then Professor Bradlow is going to be stuck with no students. The dean's office won't be that happy. And then all of a sudden, Professor Bradlow is going to be, Padmanabhan was the leader, Bradlow's the follower. The follower is going to have to follow the leader eventually, because I'm just going to have no students. So it's, its resistance can only last for so long, is my comment.
Well, what are some of the new electives in AI, and what seems to be most popular at the moment? Let's start with Marilyn. Among the new electives that you have in AI, what are they? Give me a sense of it.
So the electives that we have one course on foundations of AI, which goes through all the key technologies from machine learning, reinforcement learning, Gen AI, so that they understand what these are. Then on top of that, we have a course on AI design. And the AI design then shows how to combine these pieces with prompt engineering, fine-tuning to build business applications like chatbots. Then we have a course on business strategy, AI and business strategy, that really hits governance, ROI, and some of those themes. And then we have a host of courses across departments where, as Eric was saying, faculty have AI-fied their courses, whether these are social media courses, accounting courses, etc., where AI is a very strong theme. And we strongly encourage students to take those so that in the functional areas, they get this AI perspective. So there is some new, some old that have been AI-fied. But I think students who take the set as a set of electives, I think they're able to put a lot of the interesting pieces together. And that, one thing that I'll add, and I'm sure all our schools are doing it, is that I've always been a very strong believer that, the curricular activities are just the beginning, right? There's so much we can do outside of the courses, outside of the curriculum for our students through case competitions, talks, AI clubs, and other things. And we're working hard to set all that up as well, so that it's that experience, right? So the students are there for 2 years here. There's so much that they can get in class, but there's so much you can do outside of class as well. And that's something that I think if you thoughtfully put together a set of activities outside of class, then that makes life a lot more interesting for MBA students and business undergrads as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to build on what Balaji just said, because as he probably knows, when we started things at Wharton, now it's hard to believe, Balaji, as you know, almost 20 years ago, we were Wharton Customer Analytics. Now it's Wharton AI and Analytics Initiative, so we're WAI-AI if you'd like. It's not a bad acronym. All of the stuff historically that we did was on the not-for-credit side, which is how do we give students experiential learning opportunities outside of the classroom? How do we get them to have hands-on real data and real business problems? How do we get them to work on data-thons? Now we run what we call Hack AI-thons. How do we get them to have real-world experience, but they don't want to take a 14 or 7 or 8 week course on it. They actually want to work on a real business problem with a real data set. Then I've always said my mission, which, now 20 years later I've been able to do, is we prove proof of concept in the lower risk, non-degree granting program, and now we infect the mothership, because the mothership, the Wharton degree granting program, the Wharton MBA, the Wharton undergrad says, now, wait a second, look at all this stuff that Bradlow and WAIAI are doing. You mean students on the weekends and nights for no credit are doing AI and data science? Maybe we should bring more of that into the degree granting program. So demand sells. We prove value. We can experiment in low-risk situations at WAII, and things that work, we infect the mothership. It's a beautiful synergy, really.
Eric, what are the elective offerings in AI at Wharton these days?
So, good thing. So the way I always say is, if you want to be very successful at Wharton, you do stuff in AI and data science. If you want to be really successful at Wharton, you do stuff in finance. If you want to be really successful at Wharton, you do things in entrepreneurship. And if you want to be actually even more successful, you intersect those two. So the things that are really successful now at the Wharton School, given our brand, are the intersection of AI and data science and finance. It's one of our most popular courses, not surprisingly. AI and entrepreneurship, new product innovation, creativity. How do you come up with creative ideas now using AI and data science as a decision support tool? And so to us, Wharton, I think, knows its brand: empiricism, AI, data science, finance, entrepreneurship. So we look to create courses that sit at that intersection. And the thing that we've noticed as well is, let's remember, we're not the engineering school. There's Penn Engineering. You can get a degree in data science or AI from our engineering school, but we're the home of the application of those topics to problems in business and society. So where we win is not so much in foundational training, although as Balaji said, we have those foundational training courses too. Where we win is their application to business problems. In our case, it's in all departments, but the ones in finance, entrepreneurship, my home department, marketing, healthcare seem to be the ones that are attracting lots of students. And literally, we've probably had 20 new courses pop up in the last 2 or 3 years, and I'm expecting even more. Well, now, given AI can just create the courses for us, they're going to pop up real quick.
AI may be able to create the new courses for you, right?
When they can teach them, that's when Sharon, Balaji, and I are really getting worried.
Yeah, that would be a severe worry. Sharon, what are the elective offerings at the Carey School in AI these days?
Yeah, so again, like what Eric pointed and Balaji pointed out, so it's actually, we are evolving. So every year we are exploring new elective. And then in addition to the more fundamental that I mentioned, AI in business, machine learning fundamentals, and data and technology governance and data analytics. So we believe that AI and data analytics, they can actually help, they can make domain knowledge more effective. So that's why we also strongly believe in combining AI and data analytics with certain domain expertise, right? So for example, with finance, with supply chain management, with marketing. So we continue to explore these offerings. Yeah, and then in addition to having all faculties, try to have certain AI components in it. And I think I would share how we do it. We actually have, for example, regular teaching and learning workshop where faculty would actually, show their best practice and then their exploration and experimentation. So we highly encourage exploration and experimentation. And so I think it's just great. So there's not only that we have top-down resources, but we also try to create a peer effect. When you see like some other colleagues actually benefit from doing certain things, that's so cool, so that you wanted to learn. So basically that's how we sort of try to infuse this kind of culture in all our faculty and then our courses. And then and also as we survey student interest, we also try to offer domain knowledge plus AI and data analytics.
Well, what's the biggest challenge in deploying AI in a classroom? Is it the fact that there are so many firms attacking this from a discipline level, that there are many uses of AI and many AI products that you could say you would need to learn, for a specific task? Is that a challenge, or what do you say is the major challenge, Sharon?
So I think I would think that for AI in the classroom, so I think we alluded to earlier, it's in terms of assessment. So I think we need to really change the assessment approach. of our students. I actually remember I saw a survey from World Economic Forum, and they identify like analytical skills and problem-solving skills as the most important skills looking forward. So I think this makes sense, right? So because as this technical barrier got removed, right? So how do you creatively use these tools? Is most important, but how do we assess those skills, right? So I think here we also have a capstone project course, so students can actually work on real world problems. So in a way, we are hoping like, students can actually have a business contact, able to analyze different business situation and apply AI. So again, this is also still a evolving process for us. Yeah.
I wanted to build
Eric?
quickly on what Sharon said. So I agree with Sharon, but I'll take a slightly different perspective, which is assessment is a big part of what we do. But I'm not in the assessment business. I am, but I'm not. I'm in the learning business, right? And so one of the things that we're concerned about, but I know all educators are, and actually a number of my colleagues, this is extremely exciting, which they're running randomized experiments. And what do I mean by that? Well, John Byrne's class gets access to AI. Balaji Padmanabhan's class does not. And then we can actually, it's not just short term, but long term, what have you learned? And so this to me is a very interesting frontier, which means can Sharon Chen perform better in this class because she's used AI? Probably so. Maybe not, but probably so. But 5 years from now, 10 years from now, when she's graduated from the Carey School, does she actually have the knowledge we want her to have? And that's the part that I think we all have to be thinking about as educators. Because I said, assessment is something along the way. But John, very few of my students were, I mean, they were at the time, but 5 years, they don't remember what grade they got in my class. But I hope they remember what they learned in my class. And so is AI a hindrance to learning? I think that's a very open question.
And if I can just add, to this again from a different perspective, I think one of the things I do a lot, I'm also hearing in this conversation, and I think, John, you had mentioned it, is that sometimes we tend to talk about AI as this one thing, right? But it's not, right? And it's like so many different things. And I feel, when it comes to students and the use of AI, that it's not, what complicates it is the fact that there are so many things which are artificially intelligent, right? Systems. I started my AI work, doing genetic algorithms, and GAs were AI then, right? And so when you look at what AI is itself, and even within Gen AI, right? There are so many versions of this, and ultimately there might be millions of these Gen AI tools which are differentiated from each other, but all have different capabilities. And I think having students build an understanding of that in a very deep way is important. And the one challenge I'll say about using it in classroom is giving them enough exposure to all of these, which is a challenge, right? Because these are cases where having access to what OpenAI's resources, or like for instance, if we wanted students to be able to build their own models, it's not easy, right? Using these services, it's expensive to do it, and I'd love to be able to give them that opportunity, but there are some short-term hurdles. Now, we are trying to circumvent it by using, there are some smaller LLMs that you can use to train things. There's Llama on a workstation, and that give you the flavor, but it may not be the same as for instance, customizing something on OpenAI's platform or Gemini. And so that is a struggle. And I haven't fully figured that out, whether it means a deeper partnership with the tech vendors where they can provide some sandboxes in a way where we have access to some of their latest things. And I know all our universities are working on these types of partnerships. But to me, that's a short-term struggle. When we went through this in the early days of machine learning, we sort of eventually solved it. It took a few years, but we solved it. But it reminds me of that time.
Eric, you had a thought?
Yeah, I was just going to build on what Balaji said, which is, if students were to take, let's call it, and I mean this not in a negative or positive, like a generic large language model. Let's take Eric Bradlow's course material, Or let's try to ask just, Chat GPT-4. Let's just ask it the solution to Professor Bradlow's class, some question I've asked. It's actually not going to do that well. What everyone's starting to realize is that you want to build localized GPTs. So maybe it's ingesting all of my content, video content, text content. That's the part, by the way, in the last 30 minutes we've been discussing, we haven't talked about. The big advantage of these large language models, language should be in quotes, text data, video data, picture data, PDF files. It can integrate all of these different kinds of data, which is not that trivial to do otherwise. But the challenge is, and this is what I talk about with Wharton Computing, and Sharon, we too, while we were not the first, Carey was, we have an agreement with OpenAI now too. The crucial part is all 240 faculty members, if they could snap their fingers, would have a localized, powerful AI assistant and tool for their class that was trained on their data. And we just don't have the scale and capabilities yet to do that for every instructor. That's a big challenge because every instructor wants that, and it's not there yet.
Yeah.
Eric, I want to go back to something that you said regarding an experiment between one class that would utilize AI, one that would not, and which class would actually create the most learning. I wonder if student reliance on AI leads to a situation where, the muscle in the brain is not being as fully exercised as it once was, because you're letting AI do a lot of the work for you. And it's only natural that you would let AI do more work for you than not, if you learn how to use it properly. But in terms of the long-term consequences of that, and developing your mind to think more deeply, more profoundly about challenges and problems, are we going to see 10, 15, 20 years from now, a group of white-collar professionals who are so reliant on AI assistance that they can't function without it? I know that's a provocative idea, but you brought it up in a way.
I'll give a very extreme example to kick off this conversation because it's a fun conversation to have. And it comes up a lot in our classes. So, I ask my students, I say, look, when we communicate right now, we use language, right? We use English or whatever. We don't go to a cave and start drawing. And point to the drawing so that we understand. Like, cavemen earlier, that's how they communicated, right? And then we invented language. And now we don't start teaching people how to draw to communicate. We start with language, and then so our foundational base has changed over the years, right? So in terms of where the starting point is very different as we have new ideas. And so we are at a point where now our starting point is access to these technologies. Now, before this, we had the starting point was Google, right? So Google let us access information at the fingertips. And so the starting point changed, and we built on top of that. Now, is everything going to be perfect? No, there'll be some ups and downs, and will we lose some capabilities? Maybe, right? Maybe we've lost our capabilities to remember things as much post Google. But a lot of people would argue, why do we even need to remember as much, right? When we have these things, why not just free up that part of the brain and use it for something else? Because the brain is adaptive; it figures out other uses of those. And so I think everything we are doing in human life is an experiment of sorts. And I view this as an experiment where we are changing the starting point for what people are doing by saying, now the starting point is you have access to this. Now go about and solve the problems of the world.
Right. Sharon, your thoughts on that?
I completely agree, and I love your example. So then the one that came through me is for example, calculator, right? So basically, we make use of it. Yeah, it doesn't mean that we cannot do it. It's just we probably are going to take longer time, and then we don't question the answers from the calculator because it's in a stage that you can trust the answers. And then I also wanted to go back to, I think, Eric's earlier point, and then my earlier point about assessment. So I think I want to clarify, it's assessment about learning, right? So how can we assess how much student learned, right? So so that's why our faculty try to, for example, assume students have access. So they have them criticize the answers from GPT. So in a way, we are actually teaching students, so we take away some repetitive memorization, but then to see if they really grasp the understanding and then can do more, because that's where I think the analytical problem solving, only when you fundamentally understand how a tool works, then you are able to apply it more effectively and efficiently. So I think that kind of assessment is something we definitely need to look into. And then I agree that we need to assume the starting point is different. It's just like a step, like if we think about a tall tree, now you can step on step of the step, you can pick a higher level of root, right? So that once you cannot easily get access to it. Yeah.
Makes sense. Eric?
Yeah, I just wanted to build on something that Balaji and Sharon both said earlier. So it was Sharon's last point that made me think of it, but Balaji talked about this earlier, which was Sharon mentioned about questioning what comes out of this. Let's also be clear, and Balaji mentioned this earlier, ChatGPT, large language models, they're actually not deterministic. They're probabilistic engines. As a matter of fact, that's why, it's a predictive model. It's a predictive model, which means there's stochasticity, which means, and I love doing this exercise with students, if you ask it the same question multiple times, you're not going to get the same answer every time. It depends on, of course, the temperature you set and everything like that. If you ask it something that's also a big deal today in business schools is, can large language models generate synthetic data? Like, do I need to ask customers anymore? Can I just use large language models to do surveys? Well, since I teach a course on methods, I show them how if you embed a large language model query engine inside of a loop, you actually get a distribution of responses. And actually, that's good news because we hope it's accurately reflecting uncertainty. So all of that is good news. So the idea, I loved what Sharon said, we have to teach students, as we always have, to question the sources of information. And I hope there's not an overbelief or an overemphasis that, well, what comes out of the large language model is true. I'm not sure what that means.
Yeah,
I
really
think
interesting.
that that's one of the challenges, which is and goes back to the human bias angle, right? So if you have these amazing reports that these things produce, there's a tendency for the less educated mind to believe in it more, right? Because of how beautiful it looks and so on, and to be able to understand how to use this efficiently. And I think the challenge of verification is not easy. And I just say that because I think, I do work with a lot of companies here. And one of the hindrances is, they can deploy it, but they're worried that, when it's used, there's no person watching behind the scenes, because we know that these things can make mistakes, right? And do you have a mechanism in place to manage this process? And this is a struggle, right? This is a struggle. I don't think businesses have fully figured it out. But this is something I'm hoping that our MBA students and others will also reflect on and figure out how to balance the good with the with some of the risks or issues that come with this. And it's a human AI angle at the end, right? I mean, you need to have that human in the loop for many applications, right? I ask students, if would you fly in an airplane where the entire code is written by Gen AI, right? and of course not, right? So now that should
if
make
the
you think
pilot was
about it.
incapacitated, I might.
So these are things I think that come up where we'll want our students to have like deep thought, but it's a fascinating time, for sure.
In the traditional business disciplines like accounting and finance and marketing, there is a certain level of proficiency that one would expect, let's say, an MBA graduate to have. And I wonder, from your different points of view, how would you measure the proficiency of AI in an MBA graduate? And what would we expect in the near term and maybe in 3 or 5 years? Eric?
Well, I mean, I think I should be able, I hope I can answer that as, I am the chair of Wharton's marketing department, so I'll answer it from that hat. Besides my AI role, I am the chair of the marketing department. I would think using AI for the basic functions that marketing has a role within the organization. So we think about new products. So do you know how to use, I'll use Balaji's words or paraphrase his words, do we know how to use AI as a decision support tool to support innovation and new product launches? Do we know how to use AI as an empirical engine to think about optimal pricing? Do we know how to use AI to determine how to create advertising content? Now, of course, the advantage is, we've been teaching at Wharton and all of our business schools for years. How do you analyze numerical data? Do you know how to use textual data? Do you know how to use video data? Do you know? So what we're teaching students today, marketing has, it's the classic, what is it? 5 C's, 4 P's. Do you know how to, how do you know how to apply the principles of marketing, but using artificial intelligence as a decision support tool? And that's what we're trying to do in all of our courses.
Sharon, what's your sense of that? How do you measure the proficiency, or what should be the proficiency of an MBA graduate today in AI?
That's actually a really great question that got me thinking. So I think in the future, we know that AI is already transforming business landscape, right? So the graduates need to be AI literate, right? So what that means is that they need to know what AI is made of, right? So for example, it's actually probabilistic, right? So as Eric mentioned, right? So that's very important understanding. So we need to understand what is behind it, and then how to apply it. And then based on the properties, right? So there are a lot of things that AI would be very good at, right? So for example, if you think about pharmacology research, right? So now it can significantly went through like millions of combinations, and then to help you narrow down what are, potential great paths, right? So it can navigate through a lot of customer data that human would be,
Isn't that what you just described, Sharon? The world, whether it's in pharmacology or marketing or business, there's always, there's 15 decision variables, each with 7 levels. Okay, so there's about 1 trillion possible combinations that could be optimal, and we're asking the AI engine and data to help us sort through them.
Exactly. So you can see a huge potential. But on top of that, I think it's so important that so here we actually what we call a mindful AI curriculum, because it's so important to the MBA graduate also understand the potential bias, the ethics implication, the societal impacts. So this needs to be deep in their mindset. So if they don't have this, then I wouldn't consider them as AI proficiency. Yeah, but yeah, so that's what I want to add.
Pelagi, you have a thought on about this?
So I think of all of these as design questions, right? Asking people, how do you design solutions to problems using AI and humans, right? Now, our business problems are what they are. They are in marketing, they're in operations, they're in systems, they're in finance, they're in accounting, they're in management. But in the everyday problem, you're trying to solve problems, you're trying to create new products, etc. But how do you design new solutions using a combination of what we did before and what we have now? Right, the synthesis of the two, and another way which we try to sometimes get these students to do is, look, if you started from scratch today and you wanted to build an insurance company, what would that look like? Would it look like traditional insurance companies, etc.? Right, and when they look at the capabilities that AI have, many times the answers they come up with are wildly different. And so there is a theory that we need to think AI first, but and I wouldn't go so far. I want them to think of optimal designs that combine the best of what AI has with the best of what humans and our existing business processes are, to come up with new solutions to ongoing problems, right? And if they can articulate these, like if this was an interview and I sat across them and they were interviewing for consulting or marketing or HR, and if they could articulate this and give me these examples of how they would combine these to solve problems better, faster, more efficiently, I would hire them. And so that would be a way for me to sort of assess the extent to which that they truly understood AI, so that they're not blindly pushing it. They're able to articulate how to use it along with humans to create solutions that actually make sense.
With every disruptive innovation, there are haves and there are have-nots. There are people who benefit from these disruptions, and there are people who get bulldozed by them. I'm wondering if each of you might talk a little bit about who will be haves and who will be have-nots when all is said and done. Which MBAs will see AI and use AI as a tool to become more productive, more thoughtful, have a more meaningful impact in life, and which MBAs might be bulldozed by it? Sharon?
Wow. So again, it's really depends on what are the fundamental knowledge that they have. And then so this is also come to that what now with this tools, essentially they when you reduce barrier of one, so it make other skills become more important, especially like for example, analytical and problem solving skills, right? So because so that I feel it's going to be more important, and that's also so, and then also their domain knowledge. So I feel like a graduate with certain expertise that they have, because again, AI is very good at maximizing the value of your expertise. So that's why we actually, when we recruit students, we tell students that we hope that you consider what you have as an asset, right? Rather than consider the technical as a barrier. But because we want to leverage data analytics and AI to increase the value of what you already have. Yeah, so that's why I feel that those kind of MBA students who have the problem solving skills, thoughtful, mindful AI concept, as well as strong domain knowledge would be most successful. Yeah.
Eric?
I'm going to give you a somewhat comical answer, but it's based on what Balaji said earlier. Let's take a simple case, okay? And MBA students are smart. And I'll be an economist for a second. So I'm a professor of economics. I'll be an economist for a second. Let's imagine there's two tasks in this world, only two. One that's 90% human value, 10% AI value, and the other that's 10% human, 90% AI. Well, I don't know, John. I think many of our students are smart enough to pick the first one and not the second one. So the minute you think of human and AI, not human or AI, you start to think about what aspects to get certain things done can I use AI for, which ones can I not? And I think our students are going to gravitate towards those roles where there still is a human factor. So if you're in a purely algorithmic trading, I'll give an example. That's probably not going to be a great area going forward, because not only AI algorithms, but machine learning, people have been doing optimal portfolio trading for a long time. So that's going to be 90-10, the bad way for you as the human. Our students, I'm confident, they're smart self-selectors. They will select those roles, those topics, those tasks that they have a differential advantage in. I'm confident in Wharton students about that.
Balaji.
MBA students are amazing people. I've told them long back that, look, I don't have an MBA myself. I only have a PhD. And I said, look, there are so many things you guys can do that I cannot do. And the funny thing is, if you ask an MBA student to, solve global warming, they'll give you a solution. If you give them 1 hour, 1 week, 1 month, 1 year, the solution will change. But if you ask a PhD, we'll sit and we'll take all the time in the world and we'll never come out with answers, right? So I mean, they are problem solvers, end of the day, and they're problem solvers under time constraints. And in fact, the whole MBA program makes them that way many times. So for them, I think as long as they continue to be problem solvers and continue to think of how to best solve problems, now using AI as a help, they'll do well. And I agree with Eric a lot, because I think these students will gravitate towards the jobs and functions where they see the human element playing, a very significant role. And I think indirectly, we are sort of also talking about a different conversation here. And it makes me think of what Eric had mentioned long back about, potentially AI replacing Sharon, Eric, and me someday. And so MBA students are also concerned about that. In the real world, are there some of their jobs that will become much less relevant, right? One perspective of it is that, look, the students will figure that out because they're constantly, figuring out where they can add value. But they do worry. They say, look, if I invest 7 years in this, and then 7 years later, I've gone down the wrong path, what happens to me and things. So these are issues, I think, where we are, I think even the world there's some uncertainty in the future of jobs, no doubt about that. There are some things we think we know for sure, then we realize that, yeah, hey, we were wrong.
Balaji, as you're talking, I'm thinking, welcome to the club. Aren't you pretty good? Like I've built 30 years of skills. I'm pretty good at R and Python programming. And all of a sudden, as Sharon said earlier in her opening remarks, this has become democratized. I'm pretty sure an 18-year-old that has reasonable programming skills to start, that uses Copilot, all of a sudden there aren't Python. So I've been marginalized. That part of my skill set has been, so welcome to the club. Maybe the MBA should feel a little heat for a while. I got no problem with that.
Well, clearly all three of you are showing very strongly that you have not been marginalized, that you're still adding an incredible amount of value. And I want to thank each of you for a great session here. Eric Bradlow, Professor of Marketing, Vice Dean of AI and Analytics at Wharton. Sharon Chen, Chair and Professor of the Department of Information Systems at the W.P. Carey School of Business at Arizona State University. And Bhagat Gi, thank you so much for joining us, Dean's Professor of Decision, Operations, and Information Technologies at the University of Maryland's Smith School of Business. For all of you out there, thanks for watching. This is John Byrne with Poets and Quants.